Ave Maria, welcome back to No Apologies. Today we're going to discuss Queen Esther as a type of the Blessed Virgin Mary. In the book of Esther, we read about a young Jewish woman named Esther who was raised by her uncle Mordecai in a very large kingdom just beyond Upper Egypt. The king, King Ahasuerus, because he was publicly snubbed by his queen, in a fit of anger decides to depose her, and he sends letters out to all the provinces in his kingdom demanding that maidens be brought before him, from whom he was going to choose a new queen. When Mordecai reads this edict, he decides to send Esther, and he tells her not to reveal her heritage, not to reveal that she was a Jew. When Esther is placed before the king because of her beauty and her charm, she immediately wins his favor, and he chooses her as the new queen. Now at the same time, there's another character whose name is Ammon. Ammon was in the service of the king, and he had been raised by the king to his right hand. He had been raised to such a high position that he was placed over all the princes of all the provinces in the kingdom. And the command was given that whenever Ammon would pass anyone, man, woman, or child, they were to bend their knee and to worship him. Now Mordecai, being a devout Jew, refused to worship the man. And when this word got to Ammon's ear, Ammon, in a fit of proud fury, resolves to not only destroy Mordecai, but to destroy the entire Jewish nation. So Ammon uses his influence over the king to convince him that there is this sect in his kingdom who have their own laws, their own ordinances, and who despise the king's laws and the king's ordinances. So the king tells Ammon that he has his permission to do with these people whatever he sees fit. So Ammon has a letter written up and sent again to all the provinces in the kingdom, saying that on this one particular day, the entire Jewish people, man, woman, and child, was to be eradicated. Well, when Mordecai got word of this edict, he immediately contacts Queen Esther, and he begs her to intercede to the king on behalf of the people. Well, this meant that Esther was actually taking her life into her own hands, because the law demanded that anyone, even if it was the queen, who placed themselves in front of the king while he sat on his throne without having been summoned, was to be immediately put to death. The only exception to this was that if the king, upon seeing the person, wished to show clemency, he would stretch out his golden scepter towards that individual, and their life would be spared. So after 3 days of prayer and fasting, Queen Esther decides to show herself before the king, and she enters the king hall. Then she enters into his inner court. And when the king sees Queen Esther, she's found pleasing in his sight. And he immediately stretches out his golden scepter towards her. Queen Esther approaches and kisses the scepter. And this is what the king says to the queen. "What wilt thou, Queen Esther? What is thy request? If thou shouldest ask even 1/2 of the kingdom, it shall be given to thee." So Queen Esther asks only that he and Ammon come tonight to a banquet which she had prepared for them. And so the king accepts. And at the banquet, the king again asks Esther, "What is your petition? For it will be granted." And Esther responds, "Tomorrow night, would you and Ammon come to another banquet, and then I'll open my mind to you." The king agrees, and the following night they come to Queen Esther's banquet. And again, the king asks her, "What is your request, Queen Esther? For it will be granted, even if it's the 1/2 of the kingdom." It's then that Queen Esther begs the king for her life and the life of her people. And the king, surprised, responds, "Who is this man who would threaten the life of the queen and of the queen's people?" And then the queen points to Ammon and says, "It's this man who has ordered the destruction of all the Jewish people," revealing for the first time that she herself was a Jew. Now the king grew very angry, and when he saw Ammon approaching the queen to beg for his life, he immediately ordered that he himself be executed the following day. Queen Esther again approaches the king and asks that another letter be sent out to all the provinces and all the kingdom to reverse the letter that Ammon had written. Now this request was granted, and the whole Jewish nation was spared from utter destruction. Now the typology is pretty obvious. Just as Queen Esther interceded to the king on behalf of her people and saved them from utter destruction, so now the Blessed Virgin Mary intercedes to the king on our behalf to save us from the destruction of sin and of death. I hope to see you again. Ave Maria.